Islebound Deep Fog is a print-and-play expansion to Ryan Laukat's base game, Islebound. Islebound Deep Fog is a print-and-play expansion designed by Ryan Laukat, published by Red Raven Games. It's a game for 2 to 4 players. Each game takes about 60 to 120 minutes. It's area control, area movement game with a modular board. So Islebound Deep Fog is a completely different way to play Islebound. It's a completely different adventure, but it uses a lot of the same rules and all of the components from the actual original game. Essentially, it's a tighter board. The board consistently changes, and you consistently move these hex tiles as the explorers go through the fog and explore new areas. And then ultimately, the players are then going to have to face the fog monster and try and defeat it. To set up for a game of Islebound Deep Fog, you'll need a copy of Ryan Laukat's game and a copy of the instructions printed off the Red Raven webpage. Make sure all the hex tiles are face up without the advanced symbol on them. Then shuffle the hex tiles and attach the home ports to the side of the hex tiles and make sure that the names of the home ports are facing all in the same direction. Each player gets a ship and a starting board and sets it up as if they're playing a regular game of Islebound. If you haven't seen my video about how to play Islebound, please watch that first. Place the Deep Fog card near the top of the board. This is called the Deep Fog area. Shuffle up the event cards, place them in a single pile on the renown board, and turn the top card over so it's face up. Shuffle the reputation cards, place them in a single pile on the renown board, turn over the first card, shuffle the building cards, and then deal out 6 building cards to each player. Each player drafts building cards until there are no building cards left. So that means you pick a card, pass the ones that you don't want on to the next player. Then you would take the cards that were passed on to you, pick a card that you want, and then pass the cards on, and you keep going until there are no cards remaining. The building cards that the players have chosen as a result of the draft form their initial starting hand, and players can actually build the building straight from their hand, and the drafting allows players to choose the combos that they would like to use throughout the game. Now, there are other ways to acquire buildings throughout the game, and that is whenever you land on an isle that gives you a book token, that will allow you to draw a card from the top of the building deck. The building cards in this variant play a much more crucial and critical role for winning the game. The fact that players draft these cards at the beginning of the game means that players have the option of choosing, first of all, what cost buildings they want in their hand, plus what bonuses that they would like to choose. And this kind of forms the engine that players use to get their, resources or get to that end point in the game where you battle that fog monster. So I think it makes the building cards more important. Players will have more choice about what buildings they would like to build from their hand, and the tableau can synergize really well with a lot of the bonus spaces on the board. Able to move their ship wherever they like on this mini board. So they could go to Grinnell, they could go to Crimsica, which is an opponent-owned isle, they could go to Morlem, and they would pay the visit cost and then gain any bonus effects from that isle. Once the last player's had their turn, the round ends, and the top hex tile is then placed on the other side of this fog card. Now, when players wish to travel through the deep fog to a previously visited hex tile, they need to meet the requirements written on this particular card. Now, this card can be printed off the Red Raven's Islebound product page, and the rules for this are also available there as a PDF file. So let's have a closer look at this deep fog card. So what you'll notice on this deep fog card is that if you have a slower ship movement value, you'll need a higher dice roll in order to make it through to a previous hex tile. Obviously, if you have a faster ship movement, it's going to be much easier. So if I'm in Crimsica, but I want to go to Shrouded, which I could visit for free on a previous round, I now need to spend movement to get through this fog to then be able to get to Shrouded. So say my ship speed was 2 and I rolled a 4, I would then be able to move through the fog and choose any of the bonus effects from the isle up there. However, if the player after me tries to go through the fog and they have a ship speed of 2 but they roll a 2, that's not enough to get through the fog, so they're kind of stuck in the isle with which they're in the close proximity to, so they would only be able to gain the bonus effects of this isle. Now, as the game progresses and as the rounds end, ships are removed off the hex tiles and then they're placed back at their home ports. Then the hex tile is then shifted over again, so that new hex tiles are revealed. The previous hex tile is placed up above the fog, and then after the end of the next round, the next hex tile gets placed up there, and you keep doing that until there are no hex tiles remaining. Now, when there are no hex tiles remaining, you take the hex tiles, flip them over to the advanced side, place them in the center of the board as shown, and then what you'll notice is 4 tiles ago, we were at Grinnell, Stradic, and Morlem. We now have the advanced side of this tile in front of us, but some of them have slightly different effects. Changing the way the map works and cycling through the hex tiles really makes the choices that players have to make much more decisive, brutal, and sometimes much more interactive, because multiple players will vie for the same space on the board. The fact that you have the option to visit previously visited isles means that building up your ship's speed is very important for increasing the number of options that you have on your turn. So having 4 speed and being able to roll a 2 or more to access a previously visited hex tile means that you might gain the extra bonus over a player who has a slower ship speed. A limitation that I found was that places like Stradic that provide alternative ways for players to build their buildings became less contested and less important, because the times that you would see Stradic would be once in every 4 tiles, making it that much more difficult to build buildings if you don't have enough money. Attacking and spending influence is the same as the original game of Islebound. Now, when you're attacking, you declare the number of pirates and the number of sea serpents that you want to use, gain that many dice, and then roll them, and allocate the dice according to the actual numbers that you roll. So obviously this number here means if you roll a 1 or higher, you get 1 attack value. If you roll a 4 or higher, you get 2 attack value. So I've scored 2 1s here, so I'm going to allocate these to the 2 pirates, and then I'm going to allocate my 6 here to the sea serpent, because that will get me 3 damage, the 6 here to the sea serpent and the sea serpent. So in total, I've got 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 1 plus 1. That's 11. So remember, with the influence track, you gain influence cubes by completing the event cards that appear in this pile. And then when you want to use the influence cubes, you then remove the cubes from the track of your color and add up the total score. When a player successfully conquers or allies with a town, they then search through the event deck for the card that matches their isle. They then place the card so that the name appears just above their seaboard. If an opponent happens to take the town off a player, the player then gives their card over to that other player. Once a player has built 7 buildings, this lures the fog monster into the archipelago. This triggers the final round. Players will have to try and use either 10 renown or create an attack value of 10 in order to defeat this fog monster, and then also try and gain the 15 renown. Multiple players can try and defeat the fog monster as long as it's on the last round before their turn ends. Defeating and battling the fog monster in this version of the game is a very interesting concept. Players spend a lot of time building up their resources to purchase buildings, but also building up resources to defeat and influence the fog monster using 10 diplomacy or 10 attack, and that can be quite difficult. Players need to consider how much time it will take to acquire the resources, time it so that they can land on the right isles at the right time, that they can do it so that when that tile appears, that they'll garner the best effects from that tile and the best bonuses. And the fact that more than one player can defeat the fog monster on the same round really equalizes the game and makes it a lot tougher. Remember, player scoring occurs by adding up the leftover coins, renown, the building renown values, adding the position of their cube on the renown track, and counting up how many renown tiles that they have in. consider my final verdict, Islebound Deep Fog is an excellent extension game to players who love and adore Ryan Laukat's base game, Islebound. It provides for much tighter gameplay due to the smaller map board, and the shifting tiles means that players have to be more strategic about the timing of when they garner certain bonuses. This game feels so different from the original game, and it is a different type of adventure. There are different strategies that are used here and different avenues for winning. Thank you for joining me for another Board Game Century review. If you really like my videos, please subscribe or follow me on Instagram. Otherwise, this is Danny signing out. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.